Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here is your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 127 in the People in Fundraising webcast series, which I started almost 3 years ago. And one of my goals has been to interview at least one guest from every state. And I am so appreciative of today's guest, Patrick Kirby, who is representing North Dakota, for joining us today.
Tim, thank you so much for having me on. Number one, I appreciate just you in general for doing this as a series. This is great. And number two, I'm really glad that you know that there are two Dakotas and one is in the north. I appreciate you very much.
So my family and I did a road trip this past summer to the Dakotas, and I am sort of embarrassed to say, with a North Dakotan on the podcast, that we did the far southwest corner of your fair state and then went right to Rapid City, South Dakota.
Yeah, that's fair, by the way, because that's the part that isn't like a coffee table flat. Okay. So you get to the west end of North Dakota, it looks like a totally different state. The rest of it is just this flat land with corn and soybeans as far as the eye can see. So okay. You were in the prettiest part. So kudos to you. Yeah, well designed trip to Dakota. Yeah.
Thank you, but I do wish that we had gone to Theodore Roosevelt National Park.
That's pretty out there as well, and which is getting the brand new Teddy Roosevelt presidential library being built currently in the state park too. That's a big project that we're working on too, and it's gonna be epic. Your return will be glorious to go see bison, buffalo, and the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library.
Totally. That sounds great.
Excellent.
Well, Patrick, tell our audience, please, a little bit about yourself. You've got the Do Good Better logo behind you. I'd love to, just hear a bit about who you are as a fundraising professional, please.
Sure. All right. So I'm Patrick Kirby. I'm the founder of Do Good Better. We're a consulting firm that helps nonprofits suck less at fundraising. And I mean that in the nicest possible way, because most of us who got into the nonprofit realm are not professional fundraisers. We loved the cause. We loved the idea of being in the nonprofit realm. And at some point, someone said, you need to do an event or you need to be a fundraiser. And they were like, oh, crap, how do you do that? Yeah. And unless you just do it, you just don't know. So I've been in the fundraising realm for about 20 years. I started right out of college. I had a politics degree, which meant I was unemployed. And then I had to easily yes to my old high school, who said we need an alumni person to do some fundraising stuff. And I go, I have no other options. I love it. Yeah. And then I went on to work at the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, and I worked and I got recruited out to work at the Ann Carlson Center here in Jamestown, North Dakota, which is this wonderful place for young adults and kids with severe developmental disability and delay that wouldn't be alive through the grace of God or science. And it's just a miracle they're there, live independent lives. It was the best job that I ever had in my entire life as their CDO. But I got this itch after asking to be a mentor for some smaller nonprofits, just trying to wrap their heads around fundraising, like kind of we've talked about, like they don't know what they're doing. Sure. And I do. And I loved that light bulb moment when they understood that it wasn't complicated or they were overcomplicating it, and they could simplify it and they could have fun doing it. They could tell stories. And I was addicted out of the gate. And about 7.5 years ago, I started Do Good Better. And we've been rolling ever since. And we work typically with small, medium-sized nonprofits. We do annual giving, major gifts, board development, and special events, and then a boutique capital campaign here sprinkled in every now and then. And it's the greatest thing. I get to wake up every day and just find absolute joy in working with some of the coolest nonprofits across the Midwest and throughout the United States. And it's just awesome.
That's so great.
Yeah.
It's so great. How did you come up with the name Do Good Better, please?
So I came up with a lot of names when I was trying to figure out the business, and they all sounded like law firms. And I was like, well, that doesn't sound like me personality wise. And forever, I would just refer to nonprofit leaders as do-gooders. And I was trying to explain to somebody like what on earth I was trying to accomplish. And I was like, I know all these nonprofits do good. I just want them to do better. I go, oh, there it is. And I was like, that actually makes a lot of sense. And there wasn't a business name in North Dakota that was Do Good Better. And there wasn't a consulting firm that was doing small, medium-sized nonprofit. I go, this is perfect. It's great. And I do love when people they try to say it, or they try to like, where are you from? The better do gooder guy? And I was like, fair enough. I love it. That works for me.
Close enough. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of cool. It rolls up the tongue. It's kind of a nice little it's interesting and unique and different, and I kind of have fallen in love with it ever since.
Yeah. That's so cool. So cool. And I admire people like you, as very limited and super untech savvy podcaster myself, but like, you've got the branding. It looks like there's behind you over your left shoulder that looks like you with a dog, Captain Do-Gooder. Like, I admire people that take a concept and, in this case, your company, and then they're doing websites and marketing and making it fun and engaging. And so as I look at your shelf, I'm like, there's some stuff I can learn from you. So this is cool.
Oh, I love anyone who has the audacity to start something like you did too, though. I mean, this is the thing where I think in the nonprofit realm, we get a little bit nervous about trying something different because, and again, I've got a problem with this phrase, which is the way we've always done it before. Like it rattles in my brain a little bit gross. Yeah. And I think people are looking for authenticity. They're looking for creativity. They're looking for individuals who connect with them at a human level. And I think as nonprofit leaders, we get so worried about budgets. We get so worried about, are the centerpieces at my gala looking correctly, rather than what we're supposed to be doing, which is building these really amazing relationships and making sure that we know that the right person that we're talking to has the right program that they love to support, that makes them feel great. Like we're just linkers of trying to make people feel great about themselves. And once we remember that, all of a sudden you get to unlock creativity. Like, how can I reach another audience? How can I showcase something else? How can I do that? So what you're doing in the podcast and even book writing, where I kind of love to live recently, is just trying to find creative different ways to let our nonprofit brethren know that it's okay to be frustrated, but it's also okay to have a really good time doing really good work.
Totally. That's so refreshing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we need that every once in a while too. I just feel like that we don't get reminded enough. I write about this too in my first book, about how it kind of goes through an entire summary of like how your work week goes, and you just try to plan 20 minutes a day doing either planning, doing, documenting, celebrating, or appreciating. And Thursdays are for celebrating. And as nonprofit leaders, I know we do not celebrate enough because we think it's bragging. And especially in the Midwest, I don't know if if you toured through here, we don't like to talk about anything that we did well, because we're like, oh, I don't know, they're going to think we're just braggadocious about those things. And your donors want to know what amazing things you did. And so how do I just rattle into somebody's brain that it's okay to showcase the amazing things that you do? It's okay to celebrate wins, and it's okay to feel okay about feeling okay about fundraising. Yes. You just hammer that in as much as possible, and I love that.
So there's a couple of great things I want to follow up on, and one of them is I like your thought about, it's okay to celebrate your wins. It's okay to be open about it. And I don't know if it was Dizzy Gillespie or Louis Armstrong. One of them, I think, said, it's not bragging if you can do it.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I love that. I might have to go back and steal that line.
Yeah.
From you or Louis Armstrong. It's so true. And I don't think we give ourselves enough credit for really most nonprofit leaders. And if you're listening and you're a nonprofit leader, this probably sounds very similar to your day, where you kind of go through Sunday night or Sunday afternoon. You got the Sunday scaries. You're like, I don't know how I'm going to raise my money that I need to raise. I don't know how this event's going to go. I don't know if this donor likes me. I don't know how I'm going to navigate the nonprofit world. And we second guess ourselves, even though if you look back at the 3 years you've been working on this nonprofit, about the amount of impact and good that you have done. Yeah. And we don't take the time to do that because we're always forward looking on the 10,000 things on our plate, rather than reflecting on like, wow, we just helped 300 families have food and reduce their scarcity on whether they're going to get fed this week. Or we housed 35 individuals out of the bitter cold in North Dakota. And yes, we've got some more money to raise, but look what we did. We
Yeah.
saved we saved animals from being, euthanized. We unlocked potential from a kid who was nonverbal through an iPad at our autism center. Like, you're changing the world, and we don't recognize it enough. And I think that's what makes the burnout the biggest part about nonprofit work
Mm,
is that we just never think that we're enough. And I know that sounds woo-woo, Tim. Believe me, but I kind of like lean into the woo-woo a little bit, that
sure.
you put out into the world that you are doing great things, and you remind everybody and yourself especially that you
Yeah.
have done good work. It allows you to go, okay, I can take a deep breath. I can get over whatever this issue is that I have with a board member, and I can go back and make some phone calls and raise some more money to do more good, because that's what my purpose is.
Totally.
Yeah. Love it.
Totally.
Love
Love
it.
it. Where can people find out more about you, Do Good Better, website?
Yeah. Super easy. I mean, it's the longest website in the world, dogoodbetterconsulting.com.
Okay, great.
Again, everybody asks for the email. It's like, Patrick at dogoodbetterconsulting.com. And I go, yes, it's that long. But that's really where everything is. You can find on, iTunes for the podcast, the official Do Good Better podcast. You can go on Amazon and find Fundraise Awesomer, the first book. Um,
Nice.
but that's, and social media, I kind of pop on every once in a while. I try to do my best to limit myself to not be reliant on the adrenaline rush of a like nowadays. But
Sure.
it's really kind of just being accessible and just being around and giving out as much content and things that I can possibly give, just because I like seeing everybody succeed and be awesome at fundraising and nonprofit work.
Awesome. I love that. And that's a great segue, maybe intended or not, but I want to dive into this book, Fundraise Awesomer, which you published in 2017. And then you just mentioned your podcast too, which you launched right before the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
So you kept that going for a number of years. I'm curious again, from a content perspective, how did you develop ideas for your book, Fundraise Awesomer? And how did you keep, and that's one.
Right.
Two, how did you keep the momentum going? You have over 320 podcast episodes while managing
But
your company, your family life. Like, I've got 4 kids, and it's like, it's a lot.
it is a lot. All right, I will start with for a long time I didn't really appreciate sleep. And so I was up early and up late, and I found when trying to run a business, like, I gotta get clients, I gotta do this. But there's a creative outlet that I would always love to I needed to find a way out, right? So when I was early on in my consulting career, I was trying to figure out a way that I could teach my clients just time boxing. Because again, it was down to that 10,000, wearing 10,000 hats, doing 10,000 things, and not having enough time to do it. And they were prioritizing the wrong stuff, right? So if you're a fundraiser, but you also maybe have to dabble into marketing, it's a lot easier to move to marketing and do that stuff because it's tangible results. I published a post, I sent out an email, I did this. Where in fundraising, relationships take a long time. And the seeds you plant might take a couple of years to bloom. And so that's frustrating when you just don't know how to get stuff done. So I had come up with this concept of this like weekly planner piece that I kind of mentioned earlier. And I pitched it to a client of mine, and their CEO after a meeting she said, you should probably copyright that. That'd be like a really interesting book. And I go, what? She's like, yeah, you should just keep that in the back of your mind. And I go, huh, interesting. So
Yeah.
I took it on the road, and I said, okay, I'm going to pitch the framework, this fundraising framework, as an idea for a conference keynote. And if they pick it up, I'll write the actual keynote itself. Well,
Yeah.
like 4 days later, they go, great idea. We've never heard of that before. Let's do it. And I go, oh crap, now I got to write a presentation. So I read their presentation. I go to the conference. I go, okay, if I get a good enough review on this presentation, I will then write a manuscript for a book. And I did the presentation. It was a full house, and it got like the highest rated like presentation of the conference. And I go, ah, crap! Now I got to write a book. And And I just got to it. I crafted it out as if I was a fundraiser because I had been one for years and years and years. Where did I need a little bit of help in managing that? And so again, it was Mondays were for planning, Tuesdays were for doing, Wednesdays are for documenting, Thursdays are for celebrating, and Friday is for appreciating. And whether you carve out 20, 40, 50 minutes a day doing that one thing, at the end of the week, you have this like progress chart mentally of I actually accomplished something in my
Yes.
fundraising realm. And so that spurred this idea of like, all right, well, how do I get this message out to a lot of people? And it was right at the beginning of the pandemic, and I couldn't meet any of my clients. And especially when in human services, when you're at, with your nursing homes or kids with serious health issues, you can't go into the office. And so I had this office. I bought a microphone and I said, heck, I'm just going to start doing a podcast. I didn't know anything about a podcast. I didn't know what people were doing. I didn't know any of it. And I just loved the space to find people like yourself or
Yeah.
like other nonprofit leaders where I was learning more from them than I was anybody else. And I had the opportunity at that time is everybody was so desperate to have a human connection
Yes.
that everybody said yes to being a guest on the podcast. Like nobody ever said no. I was like, well, this is the easiest job in the world. Like, this is great. And I just kept going because I kept meeting cool people and I kept finding another idea that I'd not thought about or a mission that I'd never heard about or a leadership skill that I needed to hone myself. And so there's this partial selfish, I get to meet cool people, but then I also get to produce this podcast that everybody else can enjoy too. And it
Yeah.
became pretty popular and I just kept doing it over and over again and it just became rhythmic. And I felt like I wasn't complete with my week unless I did a podcast or had some sort of interview with a person that I'd never met before. And I felt like that was kind of a cool bit.
I like that. There's a lot of what you just said I really like, but that last statement, like you didn't feel like you were complete unless you
Yeah.
had talked with, learned from someone new.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
became like an addiction into finding out something cool about somebody. And it really honed in on my curiosity of just people. And
Yeah.
I found out the more people that I talked to and the more people that I interviewed, the better I could relate, work with clients a lot easier. I could diffuse people situations. I go, oh, you know what? Here's an interesting tip and trick on how you could do that. And it just became a natural kind of progression in my consulting career, just
Mm.
learning from other human beings and absorbing that and kind of pushing it out into the world. And it was just a really great arm of that creativity. Now, it took a lot of time, yes. But if I didn't have a way to speak or talk or write or blog or do something, it would have just been bottled up and it would have exploded. So I had to get it out in some sort of creative manner.
Yeah,
Whether people read it or not, I just needed to like produce it. And
totally.
that was a great release valve for what's rattling around in my brain 90% of the time that I just need to, word vomit to somebody. So
Excellent. Do you have other, books, publications in the works, thinking about,
I do. I have been about 3 years ago, I wrote a blog called How to Fundraise Like a Fifth Grader. Because my kid was doing fundraising at school and how seamlessly and easily they did it. Like they weren't worried about no's. They just wanted to get out in the streets and sell their butter braids or their pizzas to raise for the school fundraiser, right?
yeah,
And so I wrote a blog about it and I go, God, this would make a good book on just like how their brain works.
totally.
And this summer, I tore my Achilles, and which puts you out of commission for like months, and like you just can't move anywhere and do anything. And to get out of I wasn't talking to people, I wasn't meeting people, I wasn't like working heavily, and I was losing my creative edge, and I was kind of going a little bit insane. I said, all right, it's time to go back to the hopper and the book idea. And I just sat down for weeks and I wrote for hours and hours and hours, and I finished the completion on How to Fundraise Like a Fifth Grader, gets released in March.
Oh,
And it's all about, because I watched my kids do fundraisers again this year, and I was like, God, this is better, I think, now than it was in the idea a couple of years ago. And it's
yeah.
taking all the traits that we had as kids that we've just forgotten as adults, right? Being curious, being brave, being a team player, being curious, like all these like cool traits that kids just have naturally, we've forgotten as adults.
Or we suppress them.
Right, or we suppress them, which is worse because we
Yeah,
had a bad experience. And I think if we go back and look at what our and you as a dad know this too, and this is not just for dads, not just for parents, but it's for anybody who's ever interacted with a kid. But you know that they've got something instinctual that you're like, God, I wish you don't forget that, or I wish you would hold
Yeah,
on to that nuance as a child.
totally. Yeah.
And what if we just embrace our inner fifth grader? And what if we just take that as a fundraising piece of advice? And so that's what the book was about. And proud to say the first round of edits are done as of yesterday.
Hey.
And I'm excited about this one because it's so fun to talk about and telling a bunch of dad stories and relating about how their obsession with Pokemon is probably something that you should take note of and be as obsessed about your mission as they are talking about, Pikachu. And I think if we can take that advice into the fundraising realm, I think it's a really cool way to sort of mentally prepare for the chaos that is working at a nonprofit.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to read that book for a variety of reasons. I'm currently a fifth grader right now.
Yep.
Um, but I'm also so intrigued by people like you that can look at attributes in one area of life
Mm.
and see their corollaries or see how they can apply to another area of life. So whether it's a child and an adult,
Mm.
or a child with a fundraiser and a nonprofit raising money, like what can we learn
Yeah.
from what may seem to be very disparate situations? So
Well,
that,
and I obsess about fundraising to the point where like it annoys most people. And I get that. Just be like, can you talk about anything else? I go, I talk about the Vikings and how about much they're terrible. I can do that. Or I can talk about fundraising. And one of the things, so I did a presentation. I was called upon to like, hey, can we do a unique presentation on stuff? And I go, yeah. And so I did all of mine about old school Nintendo games, like what you
oh,
can learn from Punch Out and Contra and Mario Brothers, and the resilience that you have to have as a video game player in just old school stuff. And it was just for me. I
yeah.
thought it was just funny because I get to put up a thing on Contra and having a 21-year-old go, "What is that?" And I just get a kick out of it. But I've always looked for correlations between what we've done as just normal humans doing normal human stuff and fundraising because I think we complicate fundraising too much. We put this into this higher pedestal of like, oh, it's only for highfalutin galas and things, and only person who have really great oratory skills can be a
Yeah.
storyteller. And I go, no, this is for everyone. And fundraising, when you boil down to it, is just trying to make and match somebody with a passion and a way to help. And just that's you're a storyteller, you're a matchmaker, and that's it. And I
Yeah.
feel like anyone can draw from their own life experiences and be a better fundraiser if they just kind of think like that or think creatively outside of the box on, oh, the skill I had working at McDonald's with an angry customer that didn't get the fifth nugget in their meal.
Yeah.
How am I going to relate that to someone who didn't like their meal at a gala or was a funder who didn't get all the things they got out of their sponsorship? Like you can make all of your life choices and relationships match, and
Totally.
I love making that as a linking those things because then everybody's
Yeah.
eyes open up and like, oh, I think I have the skills to do all that, and that again goes back to that light bulb moment. I go, there it is. That's the adrenaline that I need every single day to just pump into my veins to keep doing this. And that and caffeine, that helps. But like also the light bulb moment. Yeah.
Awesome. I just have one follow-up, and then we've got that last question here.
Yeah.
You mentioned, Patrick, a lot of your clients are Midwest based, but some across the country, and they tend to be small, medium-sized nonprofits. Um, are they, just curious, without naming names, do they kind of run the gamut of the nonprofit world? Do you specialize or tend to attract art museums, healthcare?
Yeah. So I think a lot of my work at the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation and the Ann Carlson Center with individuals with developmental disability and delay, I'm really drawn to human services.
Mm,
And I'm drawn to them for a couple of reasons. Number one, they're the most resilient groups of all time. And most of them are started by parents who are fed up with either the system not providing enough stuff for their own kids, If, for example, the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation was started by parents who got sick and tired of the government classifying cystic fibrosis as an orphan disease, and so
Mm,
they didn't justify federal funding for research. So you're watching your kid, and you know this as a dad, you're watching your kid who's being told by their doctor they're not going to live past 13.
yeah.
Nothing you can do about it. And
Yeah.
they go, well, hell no, I'm going to do a whole heck of a lot about this, and I'm going to raise money and I'm going to pay pharma companies on their behalf to minimize their risk to take a drug trial from point A to point B.
Yes.
It's these parents that are and grandparents and friends and families and neighbors who see that they could make a better world and nobody else is doing anything about it. And if you're a nonprofit leader and you're thinking like, that's not me, yes, you are. This
Mm,
is exactly you. You are representing an organization that is doing the work the government can't or won't do.
yes.
You're the bridge builders between the idea and getting crap done.
Yes.
And I think that's what so inspires me about the human service groups is that whether it's autism, whether it's a learning disability, whether it's retirement facilities, whether it's working with new Americans trying to figure out a new language, there's something about this I'm going to get this done no matter who tells me no attitude
Yeah.
that I love. And I think more people should adopt that sort of, well, I'm going to do it anyway attitude in the nonprofit world rather than going, well, they told me I shouldn't do this box that you live in. And it's just, it's an in there. And they're the most inspirational every single day. And I'll relay this really quick story is that when I was working to Ann Carlson and I was probably running down the walking glumly down the hallway looking at budget spreadsheets and like bemoaning the fact that I had to go to a budget meeting. And
Mm,
I saw a kid run down the hallway screaming, "You can't catch me," right?
ah.
And their DSP, the teacher, probably another para is chasing after, like, stop him, stop him, stop him. And I'm like, I'm not. This is hilarious. Watch this. And it turns out that kid was told by his doctor when he was born that he'd never walk or talk ever. And he's
Wow.
running down the hallway screaming, "Come catch me!" I'll go, this nonprofit work is bigger than me, and
Yeah.
I will always be inspired by those that we are trying to help make an impact with, and that will always get me up in the morning a heck of a lot more than I'm worried about a budget. It's like, who am I going to get to help? Who do I have the
Yeah.
opportunity to help realize that their money can make a difference? And that sort of stuff is just that's almost an internal celebration. You're like, I get to go help a bunch of people.
Right.
Like, and I don't think we take enough time to do that too. So I'm constantly inspired by that group of nonprofits that just by hell or high water they're going to get it done.
Totally.
I love it.
Totally is. Yeah. I love that anecdote. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, my youngest brother-in-law has cystic fibrosis, and he just in August celebrated his 46th birthday.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
first of all, they're gonna at the point now they've got so many great drugs that they have developed through this venture philanthropy idea
Yeah.
is that they're living with it and not dying from it, and their lung functions are off the charts for the first time ever, and they're getting off of their respirators, and they're not having to do chest exercises anymore, and they're functioning like it's an amazing
Oh
thing.
yeah.
And I look back at like my time there, I go how frustrating it was to raise money for something that nobody knew what it was
Yeah.
and how much that challenged me to be a better salesperson of an idea,
Yeah.
getting people to rally the troops around it, build events around this idea of hope and these mysterious names and of people that you've never met before, and then that's the end result. Is that individuals like your cousin get to like live longer than you will? Congratulations, you're gonna like that's an amazing thing, and
Yes,
that's the power of the nonprofit realm. It's unbelievable.
it is. It is. Yeah. I mean, because he grew up going to CF camp in California, and you have to stand 6 feet apart from other
Yes.
CF carriers, and
Yep.
I had to get tested for it when I got married to my wife. Um, all these things, and unfortunately, he lost most of his friends
Right.
from those CF camp days, and I think just so he still does an annual golf tournament with other family members, and like now it's expanded where like most of our family volunteers at this golf tournament
Right.
every year. um it's just a remarkable development.
I love that. Um, And again, if you take anything away from that story, if you're listening to this, like, oh, you can get other people who have maybe a secondary or third circle around somebody who has that particular, like, that's how you fundraise. It's
Yes.
like, sure that that individual who has cystic fibrosis is still, rocking and rolling, lung function great. Lost a bunch of friends though, and it's unexpected of that person to do a benefit golf tournament in memory of anybody. And then think about how many other people in concentric circles outside of that now know about A, the disease, B, the
Yeah.
individuals that they haven't forgotten. Like that's the best powerful fundraising story of all time, is that
Totally.
he just took one person to do one fun idea because he probably liked golf,
He
and then
does.
it's become a thing for years and years and years. That's remarkable. It's awesome.
Yeah. So
Awesome.
great. Well, Patrick, we got about 5 minutes left. I want
All
to
right.
get to this last question here, because I think it's really important to illustrate. And I'd love to get your reaction to it. So you're on your LinkedIn bio, it notes that you, quote, strive to make fundraising less boring.
Yes.
You've got that book, Fundraise Awesomer. So
Yeah.
I just love these, energetic ways of how can we make this more exciting? How can we make it less boring? More this, less that.
Mhm.
What if you could pinpoint one aspect that you think is, most boring about fundraising, but then conversely, any creative solutions, about making it more exciting, relatable, successful? I'd love to hear it, please.
So I I've always bemoaned the fundraiser who doesn't get up and become excited about what they're about to do, right?
Yeah.
And usually it's usually with something that happens to do with the board leadership, like, oh, my board is just getting and riding me, or I didn't reach my goal, or not enough people liked my post, or whatever. Like there's a thing. And a lot of it is because you're probably pre-programmed in your brain because that's what was told to me to do in this training that I took 5 years ago, and that's what I'm going to do for the rest of eternity. And and I think where the best and brightest fundraisers understand that they got to meet everybody where they are rather than expect everybody to kind of come to them. And
Yeah.
so that requires you to think a little bit differently about what events you put on, what stories you tell, what people you need to align with, and then how much enthusiasm can you bring to the table to make what could be a very bland event even more interesting, that people want to come to it all the time. And I was told by a former boss of mine that my enthusiasm wouldn't raise enough money for the organization. And I pushed back about as hard as I've ever pushed back on any comment ever made to me in my entire life. And I go, no, it's the only reason why people are going to come to us.
Yeah.
Because if you notice the difference in tonality when you're like, "Hi, I'd like to have you donate to my cause. Please give me $50 to do this." Like nobody cares.
Right.
You set the table, and you set the tone like, "Hey, I got a question for you. If you could give $50 and change the life of this, or save three dogs for being whatever, is that something you'd be interested in doing?" Or
Yeah.
you set the table and say, "Hey, listen, I've got an event that we have to like think differently about. What if we," and this is a real life example, what if that I did was, what if we take the gala and we put it on a beach, and we get a giant tent, and we make everybody dress up in suits, but they get to wear sandals, but it's a white linen top, but it's also on the beach. Like, can we
Yeah.
do that? They're like, nobody said you couldn't. I go, let's try it. And and to make it less boring, it's not necessarily you have to force yourself to rewrite all the rules, but you got to take a look at why people aren't being attracted to your mission or your vision or your values. And it might be because you're just doing the same thing over and over
Totally.
again, and you're not
Totally.
taking a risk. And what I want to do is let everybody know that you can take a risk at your nonprofit. It's not gonna, like, the small risks about tweaking an event, or creating something like your own internal podcast or your blog that takes a different approach to something else. It's not going to turn off the people. You're going to be authentic about it. You're going to be
Yeah.
excited about it, and you're going to attract the right people who will also be enthusiastic for you. And I've said for a long time in the trainings and stuff that I do is that third party endorsement is exponentially more important than first party solicitation. You're
Oh,
expected
yeah.
to fundraise. You're expected to make a call. You're expected to make an ask. But what if you got your biggest cheerleaders to go out on your behalf and go, you know who's amazing? I think you should go to this nonprofit or check them out. I've been a fan of them for years, and I think you would love it. It just matches your personality, it matches your values. You just seem to be a good fit. Would you want to come to an event like, of course, I'm going to say yes. Somebody's already dialed into my own personality that I'm going to get matched up with this. Yes. And I think you can't do that unless you are fun about this work and that you cannot be dire and dour all the time. And I'm not talking toxic positivity. I get that, but you got to be enthusiastic about what you do. And I
Yeah.
think that changes your mental attitude about coming to work, doing work, understanding the impact that you make. And less boring doesn't mean you have to like change all the rules, but it does mean that you have to like consider why people aren't interested in your stuff. And it might be because you're just a little ugh. And no
Yeah.
one wants to give to Eeyore. They all want to give to poo, right? And so like let's do a little better on coming up and embrace the enthusiasm that you have and just kind of come out and have a little bit more fun with it. So
Yeah, absolutely. Because, we're spending 8, 9, 10 hours a day using our time, our talent, our energy.
yeah. Yeah.
Put the time to good use.
It's okay. Again, you use so much energy doing this work. And I realize that most people who are those introvert extroverts that are really good and they just need a bunch of downtime playing video games for a couple hours. I get it. I get it. But if it's not a joy to come to work because you don't realize what good you do, and it's not a joy to work because you have to do the same thing over and over again, you're going to come to work with a less of a joyful attitude. And people want to be attracted, and especially now. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but I have too, is people are so desperate for a human element. With
Yes.
everything automated and AI and online and separated from people, people are more lonely than ever. They just clamor for some sort of nugget of whether you speak to them in a language that they understand or an attitude that they've always wanted to unlock. And you're going to attract a heck of a lot more people with that sort of enthusiasm than you will on that's just the same old this year.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, encourage you to be weird about it. It's I go for it.
Well, Patrick, thank you for not having a same old conversation. This
Yeah.
was it was rich, it was entertaining, it was informative. So thank you very much. I've enjoyed our time together.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invite. I appreciate to be the first person from North Dakota on the show. I hope I represented the state well,
You did.
and I do appreciate what you do too. This kind of conversation to sort of inspire other people to kind of break out of their shell and go, "Oh, I got a new nugget of information I can use,"
Yeah.
is brilliant, and I love it.
Well, thank you. I so appreciate your time. And thanks to Cherry and Koshi in Iowa who connected Patrick and I
Yes.
to be the guest.
Yes.
And so, Patrick, your conversation will air on LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Podbean, as well as I've got a new website which is sponsored by Luis Diaz of the Donor Participation Project. So thank you, Luis. That will be airing in early February of 2025. So look for that soon. I'll tell you exactly the date once we get closer. And great to meet you, Patrick.
Awesome, my friend. Appreciate you.
Have a great weekend.
You too.
Take care.